Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Blood, Dust and Snow, Chapter 3. June the 17th, 1941 to October the 1st, 1941. On June the 22nd, 1941, Panzer-Regiment 11, as part of the 6th Panzer Division, having reached its assembly area, crossed the border near Tilsit. It formed part of Panzergruppe 4, led by General Erich Höppner, who had held command of the 1st Light Division before the German attack on Poland. The armored corps of the division consisted of 47 Panzer IIs, 155 Panzer 35Ts, 20 Panzer IVs, 8 Befehlspanzer 35Ts and 6 additional Befehlspanzer. It was the only division to deploy the small checkmate Panzer 35T. The Panzer 35T, known to the crews in Panzer-Regiment 11 and Panzerabteilung 65 as the Škoda Supersport or the Old Bucket, was already completely obsolete in 1940. The Škoda works in Pilsen, Czechoslovakia's biggest arms manufacturer, had started building the light tank Model 35 in 1936 and had successfully exported it to a number of countries prior to the German annexation in April of 1939. After Czechoslovakia was incorporated into the German Reich, the Model 35 was incorporated into the German arsenal as Panzerkampfwagen 35T, where, because of its very similar armament, it was deployed in the same role as the Panzer III, but it was far less suited for it, mainly because of its weaker armor protection and less powerful main gun. The Czech tanks were fitted with German radios, which made it possible for the different vehicle types to communicate with each other as to be led by a superior staff. To enable communications inside the vehicle, an intercom system was installed. Holders for the German gas masks were added inside the vehicle. The original alternator, magneto and starter were replaced with Bosch equipment. The performance of the 37mm gun and the good durability of the tracks was considered advantageous over the German Panzer I and Panzer II, but the riveted armor was criticized. The most important alteration was the adaptation, in line with the Wehrmacht's operational concepts, for a fourth crew member acting as loader for the main gun and as gunner for the turret machine gun. To make room for this man, 6 rounds of the main gun and 900 rounds of machine gun ammunition were dispensed with. However, only men shorter than 170 centimeters could be used in this capacity, as the turret height was limited. The German plan in the northern sector of the front was to annihilate enemy forces in the Baltic states, to seize the Baltic ports, thereupon capturing the cities of Kronstadt and, more importantly, Leningrad. As soon as German forces crossed the Soviet border, they ran into heavy resistance, but all objectives were taken in the second half of the day. On June the 24th and 25th, Kampfgruppe von Seckendorf of the 6th Panzer Division found itself at the receiving end of a counterattack by the 2nd Soviet Tank Division, which was equipped with heavy KV-1 and KV-2 tanks whose armor was virtually immune to German anti-tank fire. Near the village of Raseiniai, the seemingly invulnerable Soviet tanks rolled over the German infantry and entered the artillery positions. In the ensuing battle, the timely deployment of some 88mm anti-aircraft guns turned the tables, and after losing several tanks to their fire, the Soviets retreated. Not far away, Kampfgruppe Raus, the second battle group of the 6th Panzer Division, engaged with a single KV tank which had shot up 2 German transport columns and had effectively cut the Kampfgruppe's supply and evacuation line. The story of the ensuing battle against the lonely Russian tank has entered the realm of legend and has been told more often than many other similar and more important engagements. With speed and aggression, the 6th Panzer Division continued to overrun every enemy position in its path, broke the Stalin Line and crossed the Düna and advanced on the Luga River. In only 3 weeks it had churned through 800 kilometers, 497 miles of enemy territory over sun-baked roads, across swamps and forest, and had opened the gateway to Leningrad. The attack on which began on August 8, 1941, and which immediately ran into heavy and determined resistance. As the division fought its way through a series of strong field fortifications, Duderhof Hill, southwest of Leningrad, was taken on September 9, 1941, opening up the view to the city's harbor and the buildings of the city itself. Yet, already on September 6th, a decision of far-reaching importance for the further course of the campaign had been made. After it had been realized that the exhausted, ill-supplied and heavily depleted German troops of Army Group North were no longer capable of capturing Leningrad, the decision was made not to attack but to invest the city instead. Having put aside his interest in Leningrad, Hitler declared the northern sector a secondary theater of war. By doing so, he yielded to the urging of the General Staff and ordered preparations to be made for the attack on Moscow, shifting all expendable forces from Army Group North to Army Group Center by September the 15th. 6th Panzer Division was transferred to the Central Front to join the offensive against Moscow. June the 17th, 1941. In the morning at 09:30, the company stood assembled on the parking square, ready to leave. Behind the fence of the schoolyard on which the vehicles had been standing for the last 3 months, a dense crowd of people had assembled. Many schoolchildren among them have been given a day off just to see us go, and a few Arbeitsmeiden had postponed their potato peeling duties in the camp to bid us farewell. The Spieß makes his report, and then the boss arrives, not too early like he usually is on exercises, and I report to Oberleutnant Bethke. The boss then briefly addresses the company, whereupon we are dismissed and mount our vehicles. And then our trusty old Skoda 35Ts are rolling again. The old buckets perform admirably. My driver is my old comrade Theo Sander. I already got on well with him in Paderborn, where we had been in different companies. Now that we are sitting in the same vehicle, it will only be a matter of time before we become even better attuned to one another. My wireless operator is Hering, a member of the 5 of the 5th, the wonderful singers of our company. Like Theo Sander, he has seen action in France, while Theo has already driven the boss in Poland. He had also received the Iron Cross there. Only Erdweg and I, assistant gunner and commander, have not been on campaign so far. Time will tell how this is going to pan out. There is a bottle of champagne in my luggage, which I will crack open to commemorate the first attack. The mood in the tank is excellent. Erdweg is playing the harmonica, Hering is also sitting on the turret and is reading a funny book, a collection of jokes, drawings, caricatures and humorous anecdotes. Whenever he reads a particularly juicy story, he laughs loudly, while we glance at the contents over his shoulder. But that aside, I also have to keep an eye on my gang while having a look at our surroundings. The summer landscape with all its lakes is quite nice, and the towns and villages make a tidy impression. After dusk, during a clear night, there is a technical stop. It is so cold that Erdweg and Hering are putting on their coats. Then, when the journey continues, they make themselves comfortable to catch some sleep. Little Erdweg rolls himself up in the fighting compartment amid ammunition boxes, luggage bags and fuel canisters, sleeping the sleep of the just right below the gun. Hering stretches out next to the fuel canisters on top of one of the hatches above the engine. A wonderful fan-driven warmth radiates from the other open hatch, sending my wireless operator into a blissful sleep. Red-eyed and tired, only Theo and I keep staring into the night. One can see the sway of the light dots of the distance control lights of those in front, while looking back there is the long line of lights of vehicles following behind us. At all the crossroads and passage points there are beams of light of handheld torches carried by the marshalling sentries, who seem to appear out of the dust and haze like ghosts before quickly disappearing behind us. June the 18th, 1941. A forest, 7 kilometers east of Preußisch Ehlau. I am sitting in a meadow in the forest in the hope I will be safe here from the huge swarms of mosquitoes. Down at the forest where the tanks are, it is just unbearable. We spent the rest of the night sleeping next to the tank after having taken great care to camouflage everything. Now we have finally stowed everything away properly, we are fueled up and have conducted a last technical check. In the evening the journey continues further and further east. Just like yesterday, many aircraft pass over us. It is a nice and reassuring feeling to know that in the worst case we can always firmly count on help from above. In the morning, the whole corps seems to have met at the same water pump near a hunting lodge to wash. Charlie Zangenmeister needed a Batman to hold his soap and mirror while he was shaving. A tank of my platoon has broken down. It was Oberfeldwebel Oswald with gearbox damage. Tough luck. All the others made it, however. Because of the mosquitoes, we have stuck neck scarves under our caps in the style of the Foreign Legion. I suppose we'll resume the advance soon. In the meantime, I have been ordered to give Russian language lessons to some intelligent NCOs. The boss has gone to Königsberg, about 40 kilometers away. At 1900, it continues. We drive across very dusty roads and have to put our goggles on. At 2200, we arrive at a crossroads and have to halt to let another division pass. This grants us a few hours of sleep, so we all lie down in a roadside ditch. Too wet for my taste, so I had a kip on the engine deck of the tank. Wonderfully warm and a tremendous place to sleep. Midnight. Start engines, mount. Marsch! And so we continue through the night. In the evening we had been at Allenburg marching through Wehlau through the night. A few kilometers before Insterburg we move into a forest and camouflage ourselves again. Setting up a tent, we lie down to sleep. Except for Oswald's broken down tank, my platoon is still together. June the 19th, 1941. 10 kilometers east of Insterburg. We are in a forest about 10 kilometers from Insterburg. I slept from 0530 to 1100 hours. As soon as the sun is out, it is getting way too hot inside the tent and one starts to sweat terribly. The mosquitoes, on the other hand, don't molest us that much. Only good that my blood isn't sweet. I hardly have any visible mosquito bites, whereas some comrades have big bulbous lumps where they have been bitten. A few moments ago, I returned from the repair shop where they are working feverishly. General Jack, head of repairs, sleeves rolled up, was standing at Oswald's tank, roistering away. I couldn't resist laughing. Feldwebel Wünsche, who was there with his tank as well, came over to us when he learned from our troubles getting a new gearbox. Jack is easy. You only have to praise the transport boxes he has designed for the Panzer IIs. If you do that, he'll get you everything. Wünsche, such a rascal. The road near the workshop is terribly busy. Military, and more military. Even the Navy is present, probably naval flag. The tank is supposed to be ready by 2200 hours. June the 20th, 1941. At the Grosten Country Estate. We spent one night here. Unexpectedly, we could do so in bed. We slept like groundhogs until 10 in the morning. 7 of us had a wonderful breakfast of fresh black bread and eggs, followed, an hour later, by lunch with the Schattauer ladies, who have been great hosts. Who knows when we'll have a night like this again? The tanks are parked in a mosquito-infested forest which is part of the estate. We are very close to the border here. The Memel territory is only a stone's throw away. On the other side, the quarters will be far worse than this one. We are sitting here with the youngest daughter of the house, and I have to say that one can only marvel at the women and girls who run this place. She drives a tractor and a lorry and, when needed, acts as motorcar chauffeur of the estate. In command of a few prisoners of war of the Grande Nation and a few old men, the ladies, mother and 3 daughters, run the 670 acres of the estate. When one thinks about the women at home during their duty in the Red Cross or the Aerial Observation Command and in other positions, it is a joy to go to war for gals of that caliber. In the coming night, we'll resume our advance across the river Memel towards our special duty. June 21st, 1941. We are ready and waiting in the deployment area. On our left, attached to a different infantry regiment, is Kleinjung and his platoon tasked to attack along a forest ale. Langenbruch is doing an extra turn attacking with the motorized parts of the infantry division across the right. We arrived at the final resting place. Severe rollicking from the boss because the marshalling of the tanks was conducted too slowly and with too much noise. We slept well in a mosquito-free and dry forest and then waited for further orders from the commander of the infantry. At the same moment at which the boss returned with the same, a dispatch rider brought the address of the Führer to the soldiers on the Eastern Front. It was read out by Unteroffizier Wasmuth with his distinctive voice standing in the Kübelwagen of the boss. The whole company was assembled around it, everyone was listening eagerly. Serious faces during the Führer's deliberations, and while his final words were read out, it was clear the show would go ahead. Off we went into our final deployment area, 1.5 kilometers in front of the border, passing artillery positions and huge storage dumps with fuel and oil. Everywhere we passed, soldiers of the infantry came running up to the road to see the tanks, which would give them the support they needed to break the first resistance on the other side. Lancers of all ranks were avidly waving at us, and, looking at them, I am sure that these are just the right men to do a turn with. They are from a northern German division consisting of Oldenburgers, men from Bremen, Hamburg and Schleswig-Holstein. After a brief meeting with the commanders and our boss, we discussed some last details and then lie down at 22:30 hours to catch at least a few hours of sleep. June the 22nd, 1941. Wake-up call at 02:30 hours. It is arse cold and we have been molested by midges. But never mind, it's a Sunday and today is showtime. At 0250, fire up and forward march. Lieutenant Schöner and his platoon in front, then the boss in the heavy platoon and myself, the new boy and his rebel, at the rear. From the Jura forest, we advance against the Sakhalin position and the line at Burbiskio to the bridgehead at Gauré. As soon as we leave the forest, all hell breaks loose. I can't see anything at all, but I can hear some of our guys open up. Eventually, I and my lot also reach the spot where nothing seems to be going forward anymore because a long anti-tank obstacle is halting the advance. A few bunkers are behind it, built from wood and sand, very solid work. The advancing infantry had been taken under fire from the bunkers, several wounded and 2 or 3 killed were the result. The boss and a Panzer IV with Oberleutnant Leonhard drove up to the wooded boxes and fired directly into the firing slits from a range of 5 meters and less. The fellows inside did not get out and kicked the bucket instead. They were Mongolians. Once the pioneers had cleared a path, the company attacked this position and thus spared the infantry from an intense firefight. We assembled on the road behind the position, a few houses are burning, animals are running around in panic, a few panic carts loaded with frightened children, bags and baggage stand around. After a while we continue. I have fired on some bunkers, 5 shots in total, and a few single rounds from the machine gun into a trench. I got a rollicking from the boss as I had driven too far on the left, stayed too far behind, and so on. No one is born a master, and I will get the hang of it soon. Oswald is in a foul mood as his wireless has stopped working. We now advance on the positions at Gaure, but there we found several kilometer-long tank obstacles consisting of dug-in wooden poles. Behind that, several of those large bunkers made of wood and sand. They were taken under fire by our artillery but didn't suffer a lot from it. So again, the Panzer Force went forward with Oberleutnant Leonhard firing their shells at point-blank range into the bunker's firing slits, while the intensity of the artillery fire increased steadily. Whole salvos of high-explosive shells crashed into forests, gardens and other places in which the Russian infantry sought to find cover. Soon afterwards, our infantry launched their attack, and when they had reached the tank obstacle, we started moving forward ahead of them. 1st platoon on the right in the broad wedge, 3rd platoon on the left in the same manner, and we of the 2nd platoon in the gap behind them. The platoon of 6th Company gave covering fire, suppressing the bunkers from which a 7.6 cm gun and an anti-tank gun were firing. Then we raced forward to reach the infantry which was waiting for support in the area close to the bunkers. We actually could just drive through the tank obstacle by using the road. Russian stupidity at its finest. The idiots are known to dig an anti-tank ditch and leave a bridge leading across it intact. They very well built a bunker line with a road cutting through the tank obstacle right in front of it. Once we had crossed, we halted next to a trench. I was standing in the turret when suddenly there was a loud bang on the ground next to us. Our infantrymen threw themselves on the ground and chucked some hand grenades into the trench. I had ducked back into the turret and we advanced towards a homestead on the rise in front of us. I had the feeling that they might have their mortars up there. While doing so, we traversed the turret to the rear, halted, and fired a few rounds into the rear entrance of a bunker. The whole company had assembled at the homestead. The platoon commanders met with the boss and the infantry battalion commander to discuss how to conduct the advance on Gaure, our target of the day. Gaure was also the target of 2 other Kampfgruppen, and we sought to make sure that we got there first. We were attached to another infantry battalion which was already advancing on Gaure. My platoon and an attached Panzer IV were to support their attack. We caught up with the leading infantrymen in the forest, they mounted up, and off we went. I was following behind the Panzer IV, and behind me came the second group with Feldwebel Giersig. When we came out of the forest, we sent a few shells into the village to draw enemy return fire. With my gun, I fired upon the small spire of the church about 700 meters away. The first round hit, so I placed a second one a bit further down. One could see the shell detonating. There was a bunker marked down on our map of the defense, so we had to be careful when entering the village. When we got to the center of the village, the boss was already there. The infantry dismounted and looked for a crossing point. There was a half-finished bridge with a ford next to it, through which our vehicles could cross. Shallow entry, water about 30 centimeters deep, sandy ground. At 14:10, our platoon secured the village exit. The infantry chaps were grateful for our support and joked and waved as they marched past our tanks. Then the members of my gang, together with the infantrymen who had ridden on our tank and Oswald's crew, finally cracked open the bottle of champagne in celebration of our first attack. To be honest, I expected a lot tougher going on that day, but then it was a lot harder for the infantry. As we were standing in front of the furthermost position, we could witness an aerial combat above us. 8 bombers had flown in from the red side towards Tilsit. The artillery observers who were sitting on the rear of my tank alerted me to the fact that something was brewing above us. 3 Messerschmitts then shot down 4 of the bombers. I saw how one Messerschmitt engaged one of the heavy modern bombers. Even through all the noise on the ground, one could hear the shooting above us. Flames erupted from the bomber's fuselage, and the bird swayed to the side and then flipped over and fell towards the ground. A long trail of smoke still lingered in the air for a minute or so, while on the ground there was a crashing sound. A thick, oily black cloud rose up and signaled the end of the red bird. The advance continues towards the east. June 23rd, 1941. Written during a break in the fighting. I sit in the turret, a pair of binoculars hanging around my neck, headphones on and microphone at my throat. We marched from Steviglai, a bridgehead across the Sesuvis, to Raseiniai. The dust is terrible. When we reach Kalninai, a messenger drives up to tell us that enemy armor has been reported from the right. We prepared for combat and turned our fronts to the right. I don't really believe there is anything coming. Ahead of us, something is burning. It must be a bigger place, Raseiniai, I guess. The direction is about right. Those giant pillars of smoke are the best signal to announce we are here. Far better than any signal flare. They spring up wherever there is enemy resistance. If one fires his gun onto one of those wooden Lithuanian shacks, those shanties catch fire immediately. Yesterday morning, during the attack on the first position of Sakhalin, we could clearly see the smoke rising up from Tauroggen, and it was thick enough to block out the sun. Now, here on the road, I can see smoke rising up along the whole horizon. I wonder how long we'll have to stand here. Yesterday the phrase was Panzer forward. Today it seems to be Panzers out of the way. Günther Eggers has fallen. I have seen his grave. His Panzer II, number 601, stood on the roadside opposite, its right side holed like a sieve. 4.7 cm anti-tank gun was the culprit. He got a shell through his back and was, and one can only thank God for this, killed immediately as the next shell had ripped off both of his hands. A short greeting, hands in salute to the cap, and our Panzer rolled on. Nearby was the grave of a dispatch rider. His steel helmet rested on the wooden cross, while on Günther's cross they had placed his field cap. How often had I put on this very old battered cap with its scratched visor for fun in the casino? A year ago, Günther and I had been at officer school in Halle, and with Günther I had driven to France to visit the regiment in the same year. I had lived together with him in Thorn and also with Jochen Müllenberg. He was also with us young lieutenants when there were evenings of little actual importance, and we also sat together with him on our last officers' night at the casino at Freistadt, and at 4 in the morning, Oberleutnant Gläsken had forced him to make a speech on the behavior of young lieutenants when facing a superior officer, especially Oberleutnants. Yes, Günther, a great friend of the Arbeitsmeiden, several of whom acted as waitresses on our company evening, has now fallen. His parents will receive a letter from the company commander, who is heartbroken just as we are. There will be a death notice in the local newspaper, and his little blonde sister will cry for him. We, however, will march on with him in our thoughts. He will fight at our side, and his death will not remain unpunished. At 1100 we left Stegvillai, and now it is 1630. We are still standing along the road to Raseiniai, waiting for enemy tanks which aren't willing to arrive. Some signal troops of the Luftwaffe have started laying an FF cable towards the front. They told us they did the same job in the forest behind us earlier, and just like peacetime work, not even wearing their steel helmets, they suddenly saw a column of 15 Russians cross the road only a few meters ahead of them. And so a proper little firefight developed. Casualties on either side? None. 2 of the signals chaps, young lieutenants, have only just left after climbing up on my tank and asking all kinds of questions. Their interest dropped significantly after I had shown them the cramped inside of our fighting compartment, upon which they expressed the view that they wouldn't like to do our job after all. Still, no sign of any Russians, but several of our bombers just flew past over our heads. One can easily recognize them all, since they started carrying yellow markings. And with a bit of a time skip, we are now right in the middle of the action, as Friedrich is taking part in the invasion of the Soviet Union on June the 22nd, 1941. The first battle and the first losses, I'm sure the bottle of champagne he saved for this occasion had a somewhat bitter aftertaste. What I find interesting is that you can see the very strong cooperation between mechanized forces and infantry working together to overcome the, admittedly very shoddy, Russian defenses. But I'm sure this will pick up later on. In the next episode, that is. Cheers.